Hello, everyone. My name is Will Falk. I am a lawyer and a writer and an organizer with Protect Thacker Pass. Max already explained this, but I came up here with him on January 15th and started the protection camp here at Thacker Pass. I'm going to talk about two things. First, I'm going to kind of frame things up as to help us understand why Lithium Nevada's proposed Thacker Pass open pit lithium mine is quite frankly a racist and genocidal project. And then I'm going to kind of explain the where things are at legally and what we're trying to achieve through both the phone bank and through other legal things that we have going on. So like I said, this project quite simply is a racist project. Since we've got up here, we've learned that that this is a really important site, both for traditional uses for the Fort McDermott, Paiute, and Shoshone people, as well as many of the region's tribes. It's also a place where there was a massacre. So Duranda explained this a little bit, but Thacker Pass is known to the Paiute as Pahimaha, which means rotten moon, because there was a massacre here where people were massacred and their guts were strung out along the sagebrush. And when the hunters returned back to camp to find women, children, and elders massacred in Thacker Pass, they quickly realized how rotten everything seemed, and because Thacker Pass is kind of shaped like a crescent moon, they call it Pahimaha. This is an important thing to understand, because if Lithium Nevada puts their mine over this, they'll be covering up a massacre site. They'll be making it impossible for people to return to this site and mourn their ancestors and understand what happened to their ancestors. And I've heard people describe the situation as similar to someone wanting to put a lithium mine over Pearl Harbor or Arlington National Cemetery or over the battlefield at Gettysburg. No white person would think about putting a lithium mine over the battlefield at Gettysburg, and putting a lithium mine here in Pahimaha is very similar to that. We've also been hearing more and more that historically, when soldiers came to round up Paiute people, that a lot of Paiute people hid here in Thacker Pass. Thacker Pass provides a great view of approaches from both the east and west side. You could see soldiers coming from a long ways away by the dust that they would make, and there are a lot of rocks and caves that people could hide in up here. And so if you destroy this place, you're destroying a key part of the history of American genocide against Native peoples. It's really hard to come and understand a place if there's a huge lithium mine all over it. And I've started to think of this as the federal government was responsible for so much genocide against Native peoples, for rounding people up and putting them on reservations. And the Thacker Pass lithium mine would destroy the evidence of some of that genocide. It would destroy the evidence of a place where people had to hide because they were so scared of American soldiers. And I just really want us all to remember that, especially at a time when the new Joe Biden administration and his Secretary of the Interior, Deb Haaland, are paying a lot of lip service to so-called meaningful and robust consultation with Native peoples. If they're going to put any meaning to these new executive orders, to these new things that they're saying, then they need to understand that there has not been an adequate government-to-government consultation with the tribes in the region, with traditional folks who really understand Thacker Pass, and that needs to happen. So just to kind of explain where we're at in the permitting process, in the regulatory system with Thacker Pass mine. First, the Bureau of Land Management fast-tracked this project in July of 2020 under an executive order by Donald Trump. So under the Trump administration, this was fast-tracked, and the project was approved on January 15th, just a few days before the Trump administration was leaving power. And the total environmental impact statement process, the NEPA process here for the Thacker Pass project, it took less than a year. And the White House Office of Economic Development says on average these processes take 4.5 years. And in a recent study that they did cataloging all the environmental and NEPA process across federal agencies, found that the mean time that these processes took was 3.5 years. So this process happened way too fast. It also happened at a time this summer when the United States was suffering from the worst pandemic that we've seen in 100 years. That pandemic hit the Fort McDermott Reservation and other reservations around the area particularly hard. The comment period on the final environmental impact statement started at the end of July. And this was a time when COVID was especially ravaging Fort McDermott. The Fort McDermott Tribal Council offices were closed. People were sheltering in place. Many people were sick, especially elders. And this was simply a time when meaningful consultation would have been very, very difficult. When you have a community that's already suffered from so much, trying to deal with a new pandemic, it just seems pretty unrealistic to think that people would have enough time to sit down and really understand a project like this. We also learned a few weeks ago, there have been 2 lawsuits filed against the Bureau of Land Management for permitting the Thacker Pass mine. One of those lawsuits was brought by a local rancher. Another one of those lawsuits was brought by 4 local or regional environmental nonprofits. In negotiations with Lithium Nevada and BLM, Lithium Nevada told these 4 environmental groups that they planned on engaging in mechanical trenching operations pursuant to mitigation of destruction of cultural resources as soon as June 23rd. So just to explain what that means, the federal government, according to the federal government, artifacts and other cultural resources and historic properties, of which they know about over 1,000 cultural resource sites here in Thacker Pass. The environmental impact statement says there's over 1,000, and that there are at least 56 historic properties here that are eligible for listing under the National Register of Historic Places. But because this is technically federally owned public land, BLM acts as if they own these cultural resources. And what they do is they come up with mitigation plans to go in and actually dig up these cultural sites, because for them, the best mitigation that they think they can do is not just not having a project that would destroy cultural sites. It's not avoiding these sites. It's digging them up, cataloging the artifacts so that they can get whatever scientific and archaeological data out of these sites, and then most often sending those artifacts or whatever they find to federal repositories, and those artifacts and other archaeological and cultural resources never go back to the people that they actually should go back to. So they would most likely not go back to the Paiute and Shoshone people. It's also really absurd that the BLM's process for these things is first they have to actually go disturb the archaeological sites, disturb the cultural resource sites to actually see if there are cultural resources there. So they're not concerned with not destroying them. They're not concerned with avoiding them. They're not concerned with respecting sacred or traditional values of the land. All they want to do is dig them up to see what's there and see what sort of archaeological data they can take from those resources, and while disrespecting traditional Native people's respect or wants about these things. So luckily, the 4 environmental groups moved for what's called a preliminary injunction to get a court order to stop any disturbance of cultural sites until litigation over the permits had concluded. The Lithium Nevada and the Bureau of Land Management asked those 4 groups to agree to a stipulation that would give them a couple more weeks to finish their briefing, to finish their paperwork that they needed to file with the court, their arguments against the preliminary injunction, in exchange for promising not to disturb any cultural sites until July 29th. I want to be very clear that this should not be taken as like a big win. This is just a postponement of destruction. We're hopeful that these environmental groups can win the preliminary injunction hearing, but it's really hard to win those hearings. You have to prove that you are likely to win the underlying case. It's actually a higher standard than it takes to win the underlying case in order to achieve this. So, we're hopeful that a judge does the right thing and prevents Lithium Nevada from digging up cultural sites while there's active litigation. But we need to start preparing that will not happen. And so that means that we need to start preparing for things like direct action to block construction equipment when it comes to desecrate this land. And just to tie things back to my opening statements about this being a racist project, a lot of people think of racism and genocide as being something in the past. But in the 1860s and 1870s, when the worst of colonial violence was happening to Native people in this area, soldiers with guns came to force people onto reservations, oftentimes shot people, massacred people, and intimidated people into going onto those reservations. Well, here we are in 2021, where Native peoples are trying to stand up for their traditional places, for their sacred places, where they're trying to tell the American government, we do not want you to destroy Thacker Pass. And if they do in fact stand and try and block construction equipment, you're going to have federal and state agents, armed white men with guns, that are going to come and force these people out of the way so that they can dig up their traditional places. Intentionally destroying someone's culture is in fact a definition of genocide. So this is a racist project. It's something that we really need solidarity from non-Native peoples, and we especially need white people who do have a certain privilege when dealing with the police, to really think about whether they can come out and help us stand in front of construction equipment and prevent desecration from this amazing place. Thank you all very much for being here, and let's get the Secretary of the Interior to put her actions where her words are, and rescind this project record of decision.